This episode of Now This Is Lit is brought to you by Audible. Check the link in the description to get your first Star Wars audiobook free. Everyone loves free things. Click that link. Do it. A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away. You're listening to Now This Is Lit, a podcast about Star Wars books, the people who make them, and the readers who just can't get enough of them. I'm your host, Meg Dowell. I use she, her pronouns. And today is the first episode of a series called On Second Thought, where we reread Star Wars books we weren't super sure about the first time, and share our thoughts and feelings, etc. after reading it again. So we're gonna try it. And by we, I mean I'm gonna try it. I am the guinea pig in all of these experiments. So let's see how it goes. I had a lot of complicated feelings about Heir to the Jedi when I read it the first time. I had just gotten the hardcover off of Amazon. It's not an easy hardcover to find. Otherwise known as, if you're going to get that hardcover, you're going to be paying a lot of money. And I did that because I gotta have the whole hardcover collection, you know? This is me we're talking about. Anyway, so I read the book not knowing anything about it, just knowing it was about Luke, because Luke's on the cover. And without getting into it too much, I will say that at the time I was surrounded by some people I trusted who maybe didn't have the best influence on me, my thoughts on the book, or books in general. This book in particular was not one that was well reviewed in the space I was in at the time. So I was reading it. So as I was reading it, that kind of really heavily influenced how I felt about it, how I reacted to it. And that led to me writing a very negative, harsh, I'll say unfair review of the book. I feel bad about that review. I know it's still on the internet. I can't take it down. Please don't go looking for it. The way I reacted then was not the way I would react now. I take a much more professional and understanding approach to books, especially when I review them. I think it's fair to criticize a book. I don't think it's fair to blame an author or specific people for the way someone feels personally about a story. I would never do that now, but that's what I did then. And ever since I kind of turned around the way that I kind of handled books and reviewing and sharing my thoughts on these stories, I've wanted to revisit this book because I know it's not as bad as I seemed to think it was. I don't personally think that a lot of books are bad. I just think that some books are not for certain people. If a story is not for you, then you're not going to like it. And that's just how it is. And that's a fair criticism to have. A story can just not be your thing, and that's fine. But me wanting to reread Heir to the Jedi is kind of what inspired this idea to encourage other people to do the same with Star Wars books. You know, take a book that you remember not liking but haven't revisited since and give it another try. See what happens. And of course, because I want to do this as a series, if it works, again, this is all an experiment. Isn't that life? Isn't that living? Just, it's all experimental. I wanted to try it on myself first. So that's what we're going to do. I'm recording this at the beginning of August 2023. I've not started reading the book yet. However, I do have it on loan from the library. I'm going to listen to it this time, mostly because I don't have time to actually sit down and read it. Listening to a book is still reading it. It will not take me as long to get through it. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go read the book, or I'm going to take as much time as I need to go read the book. And then I'm going to come back and start recording again, just me, for this experiment, and kind of unpack how I'm feeling, what I thought about the book, really try to understand what the difference between that first try and now is. So this is me going off to revisit Heir to the Jedi. We'll see how it goes. There'll be some kind of break here, and then I'll be back, and you can hear my thoughts on this book that I know I'm gonna like more this time than I did last time. I have good feelings. So I'll go do some reading. And hey, if you also have complicated feelings about this book, pause, go read it again, and then come back and unpack your thoughts with me. That could be fun. Normally, my thoughts on this quote-unquote series, if it becomes one, is that it will not just be me. It will be other people joining me for this. But this time it's just me, so pause if you want to. Come back to this episode later. Go read the book, and then join me on this journey. All right, let's do it. It became a joke between my friends and I back then, a mostly harmless one, but still one I'd rather put behind me. I've since adopted the belief that it's okay if a book isn't for you. It's not okay to say a book shouldn't be for anyone. According to Goodreads, I finished reading Heir to the Jedi by Kevin Hearne on July 31st, 2019. This is important. It has less to do with the book itself and more to do with me, or rather, the external factors that may have pushed me not only to heavily dislike a good book, but also to openly and unfairly criticize it on a public forum. Now I review books with careful consideration and put the reader at the center. Then I made it about me and how I didn't like it and how no one else should like it either. And that was weird. To grow as a person, you must first acknowledge that you were still young when you were in your late 20s. And you said and did dumb things, and you turned your inside pain to the outside, and that was probably bad. You shouldn't have done that. You do not do it anymore. Heir to the Jedi was published on March 3rd, 2015, as a standalone Star Wars novel. But it wasn't supposed to happen that way. The story, told entirely from Luke Skywalker's perspective, was originally intended as the third installment in the Empire and Rebellion series. The first two books, Razor's Edge, about Leia Organa, and Honor Among Thieves, about Han Solo, are now part of Legends. Heir to the Jedi is canon. It is also one of very few published Star Wars stories to be told in first person, which was perhaps one of the reasons I struggled with it the first time around. We're offered a story that gives us a clear view of what's going on inside Luke's head. It's personal, sometimes uncomfortably so. The kind of uncomfortable stories make you when they're working, which people often mistake to be some iteration of not good. I did not want to feel uncomfortable or vulnerable at any level when I read Heir to the Jedi in 2019. My heart hurt. I was lost. I was alone. All these emotions Luke felt in that book, I had been desperately trying not to feel. The book made me feel them, so I rejected it angrily. Heir to the Jedi is different, but that's what makes it a treasure. When we analyze Star Wars books, we often hunt for connecting themes, comparing them to other stories. So much of Star Wars is about grief and about how war does not allow its central figures to properly experience trauma. This is such an integral part of the book, and yet the first time I missed it entirely. This is Luke Skywalker, lonely, even if he isn't technically alone. The only family he ever knew is gone. He has new friends, but he doesn't know them well. He gained a mentor, then he lost him. The entire fate of the galaxy rested on his shoulders, and he knows, even as the dust of the fallen Death Star settles, that the galaxy will ask him to carry its weight again and again and again. Luke Skywalker knows many things, but the most front and center in his mind is this: he wants to be a Jedi. Not much is known about the Jedi. To figure out who he is, who he might become, he must dive deep into what the Jedi were, what it means to call himself a student of the Force. Luke searches for meaning in a sort of religion, seeking to discover whether or not he belongs in it. I knew my relationship was over in the middle of a North Carolina church service, miles away from home, trapped in my quest to make someone else happy. I, too, searched for purpose in teachings I struggled to understand. I did not find it. Luke's story made me bitter. This book, at long last, lets Luke break down in grief. It's tragic, and yet, it's beautiful. Star Wars movies are wonderful, but they don't always allow their characters time to sit with their losses. Luke essentially has nothing left. He deserves to be sad. The book lets him show emotion, something the Jedi of old may not have done, but Luke Skywalker always will. I was supposed to say yes when he asked me to marry him, but I walked away instead. I drowned myself in books, surrounded myself with projects. Sickness entered my home, I could not cure it. I wrote thousands of words a day to escape. How sad it made me to think about how I might be alone when I get old and sick and sad, and who would take care of me then? When we sit down and read a book, we are not always able to escape the things that hurt us. I didn't understand then what I do now, that I didn't hate Heir to the Jedi because the book was flawed. I hated it because I hated myself, and every page reminded me of that. The book was not written for me specifically, but a reader brings to a book what they carry within them. I needed to learn what this book was telling me, but I was not ready. There's a reason I'm an advocate for rereading books, especially books you didn't love the first time you read them. We discovered new things about books we have read before. We remember sitting with them again, what we may have been going through as we begrudgingly held them in our hands. I've changed my rating of this book, and perhaps this can serve as my new review for it, to make up for the original. We need more books about Star Wars characters who are lost, because so many of us are lost. We need more stories about heroes searching for roots, because so many of us can't find ours. I'm so glad that as I read Heir to the Jedi again this summer, nearly 4 years later exactly, the aches that clouded my judgment of the book have all but mended. Time has a way of changing us through grief. I mourn now only for the person I was then, how she didn't have an anchor, how a single book was enough to turn her venomous. Me of 4 years ago would have never recommended Heir to the Jedi to anyone, but I stand before you now with a plea I presented here many times before. At the very least, read the audiobook, because it will not disappoint you. And remember, a book cannot hurt you. A book only draws out the hurt already inside you and forces you to acknowledge it. Reading is, among many things, a time for reflecting, accepting, and healing, whether you're ready or not. A book will force you to face your demons. It's what many stories exist for, to tell us we cannot run from our sorrows forever. For the record, I think the noodle scene is delightful, and if I ever joke about it again, it's out of love, respect, and my eternal devotion to space carbs. Star Wars: Heir to the Jedi is available wherever you get your Star Wars books. I am hoping this will be an ongoing series, but we'll see. I have plans to tackle the Aftermath books, at least one of them, next. I have some very special guests lined up for that, and I don't know what to expect, really. I can come on here and have an experience and write something nice, but I cannot control what other guests come on and say and do, and how rereading a book affects them and their mindset. So we will see what happens. It will not be, there probably won't be emotions like this. So I'll start you off nice and then just like shove you into the deep end, I guess. It's going to be fun. It's going to be great. Stick around if you want to. On second thought, it's going to be a great series, I hope. If there's a book, a Star Wars book specifically, that you read maybe a while ago, maybe recently, and you didn't love it, maybe consider rereading it. Maybe consider letting me know. And maybe you can come on here and we can talk about it. And you can think about, why you really had the feelings that you did. And whether or not those feelings about the book that you didn't really like the first time didn't have anything to do with the book at all. There's only one way to find out. Now This Is Lit is part of the Faraway Fandom Network. It is produced by Devor Mondum and written, hosted, and edited by me. Jose Jimenez designed our podcast art. Keep up with the show on our Substack at starwarslitpod.substack.com and find the show wherever you get your podcasts. For more book reviews and Star Wars Book Celebration, follow Star Wars Book Reviews on Instagram.